Hi guys, it's Chelsea from Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome back to my channel. I come to you today from the forest garden, which is starting to fill out. Look at it. It's starting to look so beautiful, and I have flowers coming. So now there's some color outside of all the different varied greens, and it's looking just beautiful. But today I don't actually want to talk to you about all of the beautiful things that are growing well in my garden. I actually want to do the opposite. I want to share with you some of the challenges and struggles that I'm having this year. And the reason that I want to do that is because yesterday I posted about some of the struggles I was having over on my Instagram. I post little short videos there every day pretty much about things like gardening, homesteading, and just kind of what's on my mind. But I had posted yesterday about some of the struggles I'm having with my broccoli. And several different people commented saying that it was a relief to see that somebody else was struggling, especially an account that they follow that shows all these beautiful pictures of beautiful gardens and has been gardening for a long enough time to have developed some success with it. And that it was just a relief to see that because they were struggling and having issues with their gardens. And so because of that, I really wanted to make a video for you guys sharing some of those struggles that I'm having in hopes that it can be an encouragement to you, that you can know that gardening is just tough, and year after year, you're going to have different challenges. And some things work and some things don't in the garden, and it's a learning curve every year. But the thing that makes it particularly challenging is it's a learning curve that has variables that affect everything. So you can have gardening completely down and think that you have everything figured out, like I did with broccoli and cauliflower, only to have the weather do something that you could not have predicted, and you also could have done nothing about. That there was nothing that you could have altered or changed to make the outcome better. And that makes gardening particularly challenging, or farming in any way for that matter. It is a hard gig. There's no question about it. It's extremely rewarding. You guys know how passionate I am about gardening. It's something that does something to my soul that very few other things do. And it's also really hard and really frustrating. And there's a lot of gnashing of teeth that goes on in my garden when I'm like, why? Why is this happening? So I'm going to show you one of the things that I'm talking about. And this is particularly frustrating for me because I really felt like before this year that I had growing broccoli and cauliflower down to an art form, and that there was basically nothing that could happen that would impact my ability to grow broccoli, and nature has now proven me wrong. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Tiny head of broccoli that is only going to get marginally bigger than this before I'm going to need to harvest it, or it's going to bolt. And my hope was a couple of days ago when I saw that some of them were button heading like this, was that it wouldn't happen to all of them because I have over 100 broccolis, and that would be a huge loss. But the sad news is it does look like it is happening to over half of them. The one kind of, I don't know, silver lining is that when broccolis button head like this, they do tend to grow extra side shoots. This is just something that broccoli plants do, so at least I will get some side shoots off of these broccoli. This is a pretty big loss for me. I know I'll be able to harvest some of the broccoli leaves. I mean, I have so much gorgeous kale that I'm not going to really need to do that. And I'll be able to feed a lot of this stuff to my pigs and my chickens. But to lose that much broccoli, especially when we love broccoli as much as we do, is a big loss for us. And the amount of work and effort that's gone into growing these beautiful plants is work and effort, and it's time that was spent. Why did this happen? It happened for a couple of reasons, and the biggest reason is that after I put them out, we had a stretch of good weather, so I put them out when I normally do, the kind of time, the sweet spot that I've found over the last couple of years of growing broccoli. And then we got an unseasonably cold 2 weeks. So it wasn't just a couple of days, it was a couple of weeks. Broccoli do not like temperature under 7 degrees Celsius, and I'll put the Fahrenheit somewhere on the screen here. And they can handle that if it's for a night and then things get back to normal again as far as temperature, but they cannot handle those kinds of temperatures over the long haul. Then the worst thing happened. We had all that cold weather, and then we had 2 days of really, really hot weather, unseasonably hot weather, which actually caused my Swiss chard, a couple of my Swiss chard, to bolt. So plants get stressed when there are big variations in temperature. Whether it gets really, really hot for a couple of days and the plants haven't been able to adjust to warmer temperatures because there wasn't like a gradual increase, or if temperatures have been really cold for a sustained period of time. And there is nothing that the farmer can do about that. There's nothing the gardener can do about that. We just can't. We cannot control the weather as much as all of us wish that we could. This is just a fact of gardening, and a couple of years ago, a loss like this would have actually devastated me. I probably would have had a really good cry about it, and I just would have felt honestly really bad about myself and that there's something that I could have done differently. But I've just learned over the years that this kind of thing just happens with gardening. And if it wasn't the broccoli this year, it would have been something else, because each year there's always something that doesn't do well because of something that has to do with the weather. I'm really sad it was the broccoli because it's one of our favorite vegetables, but I kind of just have to roll with it. And sadly, it also looks like this is going to be happening with some of my cauliflower as well. I still have hope, because some of them haven't formed heads yet, that I will end up with some larger ones. So this is one of my cauliflower, and it certainly looks beautiful, but like, it's only a couple inches across. It is not going to grow much bigger than this, a little bit bigger, but I'm going to have to watch this incredibly closely because I just checked the weather report and we have 6 days of rain. And if there's one thing that broccoli and cauliflower do not like once the heads start forming, it's a massive amount of rain, and sometimes it can rot them out. So I'm going to be checking these multiple times a day, and if I start seeing any sign of rot, I'm just going to pull them and cut my losses and just enjoy the fact that I get some at all, because at least I'm going to get some. There is no question that this has been a bit of a strange year, and I'm going to be suffering losses in my garden of things that I definitely have never experienced before. And I'll give you another example of that. Oh, I'm so happy the sun's coming out. Okay, so these are beets, and as you can see, this beet patch is incredibly spotty, and it is not spotty because I've been pulling out early greens. It is spotty because my germination was terrible, and I ended up with hardly any beets. What I have done here is I've actually reseeded in between everywhere where there aren't beets, and so they're starting to come up. But I store a lot of beets in the winter time. One of the things that I garden for primarily is for winter food storage, and beets are a staple for us in the winter time. It really surprised me because I have never had any issues with growing beets before. Last year was a little bit weird because it was wet, and so my beets weren't as big as they usually are, but they definitely didn't have any issues with germination. It took 22 days for my carrots to germinate this year, and the weed competition was fierce. I'll give you an example of that over here. This is one of my carrot patches, and you can see the rows of carrots here. This, I did a lot of this weeding yesterday, and there are tons of weeds, as you can see, growing up over here. Carrots have up to a 21-day germination, and these actually didn't come up until day 22, but during that entire period of time, there's a fly buzzing around me. During that entire period of time, the weeds were growing, and when carrots come up, they're super teeny tiny, and it makes it really difficult to weed around them. So I had to wait until the carrots grew big enough that I could see them and then get in and weed them, and it's just been a huge battle, but I am on a mission to get carrots this year. So I have come up with some ways that I'm going to change things up for next year. I'm going to use landscape fabric over top of my germinating seeds, and then as soon as they come up, I'll pull them off, and that will stop the weeds from growing. And I did do this with my parsnip patch this year, and it worked really well. So I guess that's the other thing I would say, is that each year as nature throws a new challenge at you, you will learn to adapt. But just know that there are some things that there's just nothing you can do anything about, like the weather. So trying to circumvent it as much as possible, trying to give your plants the best start you can, of course, is a good thing to do, but don't beat yourself up if Mother Nature thwarts you, because she will. It's a guarantee. One of the things that we are a bit nervous about is that we normally are starting to consider cutting our hay at this point, waiting for a couple of good days. So you can see our hay here and how it's all starting to lay down like this. That's because we've had so much rain. So the hay is growing really well, which is lovely, but it's all falling down and we aren't able to cut it because we don't have any stretches of warm weather. We need at least 3 hot days in order to cut our hay. One of my neighbors last year ended up losing, I think it was over 50 bales of hay, big round bales of hay, because he ended up having to cut when it was too wet, and it ended up composting and actually lighting on fire. So that's just insane. We're a little bit nervous this year that it's going to be a bit tricky to get the hay up because the weather just doesn't seem to be changing. We have sun right now, but we're supposed to get rain and thunderstorms by this afternoon. So I mentioned that I lost all of my beans. Fortunately, I was able to reseed. We also had a hailstorm the other day and got some holes blasted through some of the more tender leaves. But I am hopeful that these beans will grow. I have to get in here and weed too. This weed cloth is great, but you still do have to get in and weed around your holes. Well, I have an extra plant in there. Even if you use the weed cloth, because weeds are such opportunistic plants, they will find anywhere to poke through if they can. I meant to give these onions a haircut the other day, but I didn't get around to it, so I really need to get out here and do that. I've had several people comment about how it's not necessary to cut your onion tops. I have done it both ways, and I have noticed that my onions were bigger when I did cut the tops of them. That's just my own personal experience, but you can do it both ways. You can trim them or you can not trim them, and you'll probably still get a decent onion size. That's just what I do. And honestly, it's if I get around to it. If I don't get around to it, I don't sweat it. It's not a big deal. So just kind of, one of the things that you can do, and this is something that I really recommend, is to experiment. So do some of yours trimmed, some of them not trimmed, or even if it comes to pruning tomatoes, try pruning some, try not pruning others until you figure out what works for you, because every single garden is so different. Even where I live, 10 minutes down the road, they have a little microclimate and they can grow things that I can't grow where I am. So if I were to take their advice on how to grow everything, I would probably end up losing crops because we don't have the same growing climate. The other thing about gardening, especially now that gardening is on YouTube the way that it is and on social media, is that there's always kind of fads that blow through where everybody's doing this one thing, and then a lot of people realize, oh well, that's not going to work for me or whatever. So I would encourage you not to jump on bandwagons, but just do some experimentation with them, because you'll find some things that work really well and some things that don't. I come down here and my heart just feels so full. It's just so full. I have to brace myself for the fact that maybe something's going to go awry here, or I'm going to end up with some issues with bugs or something like that, and I'll have to adapt and change and grow. And that's, I guess, kind of the cool thing about the garden, is it's a bit of a metaphor for life. There are a lot of beautiful things in life, and there are a lot of hard and challenging things in life, and we just try to grow and adapt and change and learn, and then roll with the things that are just outside of our control. Probably the biggest thing that the garden has taught me is just that there are things that you just can't control, and sometimes you just gotta let go and let it be what it is. And then also sometimes you have to trellis tomatoes. One sec. One of the things that someone had mentioned, or a couple people actually mentioned on the last video where I was talking about pruning tomatoes, was that you really shouldn't prune bush tomatoes, which is what these tomatoes are across here, because apparently it makes a pretty big impact on the amount of fruit that you get. And I have to say, I have been asking a lot of people about growing bush tomatoes, and I have heard pretty much 50-50 on it. Some people say absolutely don't. It affects your overall amount of tomatoes that you're gonna get. And some people say to do the 2-liter system, which is what I'm doing on my bush tomatoes, and not to pull the suckers, which are the little branches that grow out from the crook of the tomato plant. As you can see, I'm pulling mine off. So again, I'm gonna go back to what I've said before. try and experiment with your situation. Talk to people and do what kind of feels right to you and what works for you. And for me, if I feel like if I were to let these just grow without any type of pruning, then I would end up with air circulation problems. I did plant my tomatoes really close together, so that's something maybe I could consider changing for next year, is giving them more space and letting them bush out a bit more. But so far, I don't feel like the amount of tomatoes that I'm getting is going to be impacted. As you can see with this one, I have tons of flowers on them, and I already have lots of tomatoes growing down below. So I don't feel like I'm going to end up with a huge loss because I have been pulling off most of the suckers on this plant. But again, do what works for you in your growing climate and experiment. Don't be alarmed if people have really strong opinions about how you're doing it. Gardening is kind of an innovative thing because each growing situation is so different and every season is so different. You really have to be quite innovative and creative to adapt to all those changing circumstances. And what works one year for you might not work the following years. And on that note, I am going to close up this greenhouse and let it stay nice and toasty warm. One of the things that Dan is doing today is building the latches and the vents for up here. Right now this is just open so that he can have this project, check it off as finished. So I'm excited about getting those things done, or having him get those things done. I am going to head back in the house after I find my phone, which I did lose again. And Dan and I are going to switch out because he is inside with the kids, and now he's going to come out and do his work. And that's really how we get a lot of the projects that we need to get done around the property done, is we trade out. And we have different areas that are sort of our areas that we work on the farm. So for me, the garden, the greenhouse, and the animals, that's my area. And then so he does all of the kind of heavy lifting work, anything that has to do with the machinery, building our driveway. He does most of the haying and that kind of thing. So we really, I think, have a pretty good balance for making this work, because it is a lot of work. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye.